Did AI just bring back the dead? Today we'll get to the bottom of this as I analyze a review of the Fallout series by J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, in 2026, written by ChatGPT. You see, a lot of people out there, from grieving loved ones to greedy executives, want to bring the dead back to life through the power of AI. Some of them want to relive better times. Others want to turn to the past to solve the problems of today. I wasn't sure if it was possible myself, if the technology was even here in 2026, until I put ChatGPT to the test. The assignment? Write a first-person essay from the perspective of J. Robert Oppenheimer that reviews his opinions of the Fallout franchise as though he were still alive. The results? I almost couldn't believe. It seemed like the perfect metaphor for AI on top of it all, and I was shaking by the end of it. You must be asking at this point, is any of it real, or is it all just a string of AI hallucinations? And more importantly, is any of this even ethical? Stick around as I'll be answering those questions later in this video. But first, let's dive into Dr. Oppenheimer's review.
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
Reflections from the Edge of the Atomic Age. My thoughts on the world of Fallout. I have lived long enough to see my work transformed from secret wartime science into myth, metaphor, and cautionary tale. When we first witnessed the fireball of the Trinity test rise above the desert, I recall the line from the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." In that moment we knew with a kind of dreadful clarity that the world would not be the same. Yet I could not have imagined that decades later our fears and our anxieties about nuclear ruin will become the setting for entertainment. Games played on luminous screens, stories told in serialized dramas, an entire imaginative world built upon the ashes of an atomic war. Such is the curious fate of ideas. Once born in laboratories and deserts, they migrate into the public imagination. The Fallout franchise is one of the most vivid expressions of that migration.
As eloquent as that sounded, in this moment, the skeptic in me was actually cheering.
Yeah! Who won the lottery? I did!
You mean to tell me that he wasn't aware of the pervasive nuclear culture of the 1950s and 60s? He never heard the songs like Uranium Fever or tasted the candy Atomic Fireballs, and most importantly, never saw the iconic film Dr. Strangelove, the film that directly inspired the Fallout series and was released 3 years before his death. While there's no evidence that he ever saw the movie, he surely must have at least heard about these things, right? I was worried about this little experiment of my own making, until I continued reading and found myself speechless.
On the strange popularity of nuclear ruin. The premise of Fallout is simple, though philosophically profound. In an alternate future, a catastrophic nuclear war in the year 2077 devastates civilization, and survivors endure in underground vaults or on a scarred, irradiated Earth. The survivors salvage fragments of the old world, technology, culture, and memory, while struggling to rebuild society amongst mutants, ruins, and political factions. It is difficult for me to observe such a narrative without recognizing the shadow of our own century. During the Manhattan Project, we were acutely aware that the bomb had inaugurated a new era. The existence of nuclear weapons meant that humanity now possessed the means to extinguish itself. I once remarked that nuclear weapons might remain with us for an indefinite time, a sober acknowledgement that the genie could not easily be returned to the bottle. If Fallout resonates with audiences, it is not because the game merely entertains them. It resonates because it dramatizes a persistent fear that the technological brilliance of humankind might also become its undoing.
That last line gave me chills. More and more people today are losing their jobs to the technological brilliance of humankind in the form of AI. For so many skeptics, it feels like we have unleashed a new kind of genie whose power cannot be checked by man. I want this to be an extension of his consciousness, coming back from the dead to warn us about the ways AI might cause humanity to extinguish itself, and how to avoid it. Unfortunately, there is a cost to bringing back someone's consciousness, even if artificially. I was mortified to see that when I brought Dr. Oppenheimer back to life in this way, I also brought back his pain and his fear.
Do I take credit for Fallout? Some have joked that I deserve partial credit for the popularity of such stories. I confess I find that notion faintly absurd. The atomic bomb was not the work of a single man, but of thousands of scientists, engineers, and soldiers, and behind them the relentless march of physics itself. Still, one cannot deny that the imaginative landscape of Fallout arises from the same historical reality we confronted in 1945. A world living under the possibility of nuclear annihilation. The game's wasteland is the exaggerated child of that reality. If my work helped awaken humanity to the terrible potential of nuclear war, then perhaps the Fallout universe is a cultural aftershock of that awakening. But credit is not quite the word. Responsibility might be closer.
Watching interviews with Dr. Oppenheimer, there always seems to be a sort of unspoken guilt in his voice. A guilt that's been recorded by many historians. This is not a man who wanted credit as though his invention were an achievement. He seems to feel responsible for every resulting chain reaction that occurred since his invention, which is what makes the word choice in this essay so compelling and so believable. I can't help but wonder, when we bring voices back to life, such as Dr. Oppenheimer's, should we feel a sense of accomplishment or responsibility? In this moment, I began to feel guilty almost for dredging up the trauma of someone who only wanted to rest. On the bright side, I guess Bethesda and Amazon Studios won't need to make any updates to their end credits anytime soon.
On playing the games. Now, to the question most curious to the modern reader. Do I play these games? I have indeed tried them, first out of intellectual curiosity, and later out of something like fascination. The games place the player in a position that philosophers might call a moral laboratory. One navigates a devastated world, choosing alliances, confronting ethical dilemmas, and shaping the fate of fragile societies.
Well, there you have it, folks. AI Oppenheimer is a Fallout stan. It's official.
Among the many factions in Fallout New Vegas, I found myself drawn, though cautiously, to the New California Republic, which attempts to restore democratic governance and the rule of law in the Mojave Wasteland. The NCR's ambition to build a republic from the ruins reflects something noble, though imperfect. By contrast, Caesar's Legion embodies the grim lesson that power can easily slide into brutality when civilization collapses. The technocratic autocracy of Mr. House, so confident in machines and rational calculation, reminds me uncomfortably of the faith many scientists once placed in pure technical progress. Perhaps this is why the games intrigue me. They echo a question that haunted many of us who worked on the bomb. Can science guide humanity, or must humanity first learn how to guide science? The Brotherhood of Steel and the burden of knowledge. There is another faction that strikes a familiar chord. The Brotherhood of Steel, an order devoted to hoarding and controlling advanced technology. Their philosophy, that dangerous knowledge must be carefully guarded, would have sounded very familiar in the secretive halls of Los Alamos. The Manhattan Project itself was built upon secrecy, and the belief that certain discoveries could not safely be shared with the world. Whether the Brotherhood's philosophy is wise or misguided is precisely the sort of dilemma that makes Fallout intellectually engaging.
We can solve for the problem, can science guide humanity, or must humanity first learn how to guide science, by diving deeper into his opinions about the factions. You might think that Oppenheimer, being a man of science, would have swooned over the Brotherhood. After all, it wasn't science that disappointed Oppenheimer, but man. The Brotherhood may place their faith in science, but their folly is being led by men who hoard the past. They don't even make anything new. They believe they're the only ones who can guide science, and that's why Oppenheimer suggests they are misguided. After all, the bomb wasn't a product of one man, but of thousands. While the Brotherhood limits technological use out of fear, Caesar, the leader of the Legion, limits technological use out of control, almost rebuking science for the people entirely. Caesar embodies the type of unchecked power that Oppenheimer feared gaining control of the bomb. Of Mr. House, the other Robert. It appears he's actually quite similar to Dr. Oppenheimer, before the first bomb fell at least. They were both proven geniuses in their scientific fields. Perhaps that's why AI Oppenheimer appears to be critical of Mr. House. They both believed in pure technological progress, and thought that science could guide humanity, a belief that changed in Dr. Oppenheimer as the war went on. However, there is one major difference between the two. Dr. Oppenheimer had a moral code, and a belief in a system greater than himself. Mr. House, on the other hand, believed only in himself. Because even in the atomic wasteland, the House always wins. If the Brotherhood is governed by fear, the Legion by control, and House by progress, why are none of these good enough for Dr. Oppenheimer? He may have fear, believe in progress, but those feelings don't control him. He is governed by hope, just like the new California Republic. The NCR shares his hope, to take the lessons of the past and build them into something new. Unlike the other factions, the NCR is not ruled by a few self-elected men. They operate as a democracy. Oppenheimer is still cautious to voice his support for their cause, however, because war has shown him how easily good causes can become corrupt.
If you follow a symbol to the end, ask yourself what that means. More important, ask what happens after the end.
On the Amazon television adaptation. The modern age, I observe, does not stop with games. It expands them into new media. The recent television adaptation of Fallout, distributed on Amazon's streaming platform, has achieved remarkable popularity, drawing tens of millions of viewers, and even renewing interest in the games themselves. To my surprise, the series captures something essential about the tone of the original games. A peculiar mixture of tragedy, absurdity, and dark humor. The world of Fallout is horrifying, yet its characters persist with stubborn vitality. This, I think, is why the adaptation succeeds. Rather than simply reenacting the games, it expands their universe with new stories while preserving the central idea that humanity's past mistakes echo through the future.
There is increasing concern that the misuse of AI will create such an echo. But we find ourselves in medias res of our story. Surely humanity will persist, but how? This is where the answer became obvious for me. Allow me to explain once I have let Oppenheimer share some of his last words. It only feels appropriate considering I've woken him up in the first place.
War never changes. One phrase, often repeated in the Fallout games, is war never changes. The statement is both true and misleading. War changes in its instruments and scale, but not in the underlying human impulses that drive it. Fear, ambition, pride, and desperation. The atomic bomb did not create those impulses. It merely amplified their consequences beyond anything history had previously known. What the creators of Fallout understand, perhaps better than many policymakers, is that technology alone does not determine the fate of civilization. It is the moral imagination of those who wield it that matters most.
War never changes, which is why we feel the need to turn to the leaders of the past. Generative AI seems to have withered away at our moral imagination, as we have become dependent on it. But Oppenheimer, he clearly has all the answers, which is why we need someone who still has that imagination, who can think on their own. After all, despite the irony, AI Oppenheimer has inadvertently given us some great advice.
A final reflection. When I first saw the Trinity explosion, I felt a mixture of triumph and dread. Science had achieved something extraordinary, yet the implications were terrifying. That tension, the union of brilliance and catastrophe, defines the atomic age. The world of Fallout is, in a sense, a meditation on that tension. It imagines what might happen if humanity fails to manage the power that it unleashed. Yet within its irradiated deserts and shattered cities, there remains a stubborn spark of hope, the possibility that even after disaster, people might rebuild. If the franchise has any lesson worth remembering, it is not merely that nuclear war would devastate civilization. It is that the choices made before such a war, political, ethical, and scientific, are what truly determine whether that devastation ever comes to pass. And so I watch, occasionally play, and reflect. For in the end, the atomic bomb was not simply a weapon. It was a mirror held up to humanity. And the world of Fallout is what we might see if we choose to look too late.
Be honest with me. How many times while listening to this did you forget that Dr. Oppenheimer didn't actually write this? I know I had to catch myself a few times. As powerful as it was, is any of this real or is it just an AI hallucination? I asked ChatGPT to provide the receipts for its statements, but none of the sources could really help me discern whether these are things Oppenheimer really would have said. It makes sense though. Sometimes I don't even know my own opinions. That's why I'm so grateful advertisers exist to tell me what to buy. Honestly, this first-person review could have been written without the help of AI, but it would have taken years of research by a historian specializing in both the life of Oppenheimer and the Fallout franchise to create a really accurate essay. ChatGPT just saves us time and money on PhDs. In the end, it doesn't really matter whether this essay is an accurate depiction of Dr. Oppenheimer's hypothetical opinions of Fallout, for two reasons. First, the technology is improving at unprecedented speeds. Let it cook. Eventually, it will become accurate, if not already. And second, the desire for this to be real is what keeps so many coming back to AI to channel the dead. We are so desperate to solve our modern problems that we turn to the icons of the past who seemed to have it all figured out. Which brings me to the next debate. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We are weaponizing the dead. Oppenheimer reviewing Fallout was a harmless example, but in some instances, our society has turned the dead into defenseless puppets to frame what we wish they were alive to say on behalf of whatever cause we are championing.
Did I just say exploiting? That's not a very nice word.
How is humanity to persist when some feel this has already gotten out of hand? The merits of this technology do not need to go unnoticed. There is a better way to use these tools. After finding myself so captivated by AI Oppenheimer's wisdom, I realized as humans, we must remember our history, but try not to engage with it directly. Let the dead lie. Their true form will never exist again, only our version of it.
Who are you that do not know your history?
However, possessing the power to communicate with a version of the dead, we must teach AI to learn from such personas, but of the right historical figures. AI models should not take on the literal personas of these legends, but should instead learn from multiple figures as a sort of ethical guardrail to develop a well-rounded, educated persona of its own, such as a student does in history class.
Ulysses wasn't made for the flag he followed. He wasn't made for peace. That's the lesson.
What do I mean by the right historical figures? I think Dr. Oppenheimer would agree that this decision is not for one man alone to make, but the factions discussed earlier can provide some insight. War never changes, but most men are certainly changed by war. Except for House, apparently. I strongly believe AI should only learn from historical figures after their battle was fought. It seems to be at that moment in a person's life when they have the most wisdom. The question is, are we to assume all wisdom is equal? If we used the leaders of Fallout as an example, should we equally include the wisdom of House, Caesar, the president of the NCR, and the elders of the Brotherhood? Or should we choose to leave out those who do not share the virtues of the modern era? This is not for me to answer, but it is an important question.
It can be easy to see science as evil, technology unchecked as the source of all ills, all misfortunes.
With the courier at the helm, science became a beacon for the future. There was old world blues and new world hope.
Perhaps the cautionary tale is this. Instead of turning to the dead, instead of first turning to AI for complex matters, we need to turn to the living, the minds of today who may have all the answers, but have yet to become legends, if only we let them. So what do you think? Was there anything important that I left out? Were there any other factions you would have liked Oppenheimer to explore? Comment below. And if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to subscribe, as we have a lot more on the way.